It was late, and the house was silent, but I felt it before I saw it. The weight of his presence. My heart raced as I stepped into the dimly lit room, and there he was, waiting for me in the shadows. His eyes locked onto mine, and I could tell there was no turning back. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and filled with something I couldn't quite place. I knew then. Nothing would ever be the same. They say secrets have a way of finding you, no matter how hard you try to bury them. I never expected to be in this position, to feel what I felt, to do what I did, but life has a funny way of throwing you into the deep end when you least expect it. And this was a storm I wasn't prepared for. It all started the day my husband brought Liam, his son from his first marriage, back into our lives. He was 22, brooding, and carried an air of confidence that was both intriguing and unsettling. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, an innocent admiration for someone young and full of life. But the way he looked at me, it sent shivers down my spine. We didn't talk much at first. Polite greetings, casual smiles, nothing out of the ordinary. But there was always an undercurrent, something unspoken lingering in the air. I'd catch him watching me from across the room, his gaze intense, like he was trying to figure me out. And then, there were the moments when we were alone, when the air between us felt charged, like a live wire sparking with tension. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself I was imagining things. But one evening, as I stood in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, I felt him behind me. Close. Too close. "You missed a spot," he said, his voice low and teasing. I turned to find him leaning against the counter, his eyes locked on mine. My breath hitched, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. I laughed nervously, trying to diffuse the tension, but the way he looked at me, like he was seeing right through me, made my heart pound. I told myself it was harmless, that I could handle it. But the truth? I was lying to myself. One night, I came home late from a work event. The house was dark, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator. I thought everyone was asleep, but as I walked down the hallway, I felt it. That undeniable pull, like I was being drawn into something I couldn't control. As I turned the corner, I saw him. Liam. He was sitting in the living room, the faint glow of the streetlights casting shadows across his face. "You're late," he said, his voice steady but loaded with something I couldn't quite place. I laughed it off, trying to keep things light. "Didn't know you were keeping tabs on me," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded forced. He stood, his movements slow and deliberate, and closed the distance between us. "You don't have to pretend, you know," he said, his voice soft but intense. "I see the way you look at me." My heart was in my throat. I wanted to deny it, to push him away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But the truth was, I couldn't. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances, lingering touches, and a tension so thick it was suffocating. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. The way he made me feel, it was intoxicating. One evening, my husband was out of town for a business trip. I told myself I'd spend the night catching up on work, but the moment Liam walked into the room, all my resolve crumbled. He sat across from me, his eyes never leaving mine, and said, "We need to talk." I nodded, my throat dry, as he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can keep pretending this isn't happening, or you can admit it. What do you want?" His words hung in the air, heavy and electric. I wanted to run, to escape the truth staring me in the face. But instead, I stayed. And what happened next? It changed everything. I'd like to tell you I fought it, that I pushed him away and walked the righteous path. But I didn't. That night, every wall I'd built, every excuse I'd made, came crashing down. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming, but so was the pull, the undeniable connection that I couldn't ignore. We tried to keep our distance, to pretend nothing had happened, but every time we were in the same room, the tension was unbearable. Eventually, the cracks started to show. My husband began to notice the strained silences, the way I avoided eye contact. And Liam? He wasn't exactly subtle. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his hand lingering just a second too long, or say things that only I understood. The breaking point came one evening when my husband confronted me. He accused me of being distant, of hiding something. I wanted to tell him, to confess everything and beg for his forgiveness. But when I looked at Liam, standing silently in the corner, I couldn't do it. Secrets like ours are like poison, slowly eating away at everything good in your life. And yet, even knowing that, I couldn't stop. Now, as I sit here, reflecting on everything that's happened, I'm left with a question I can't answer. Was it worth it? The risk? The heartbreak? The lies? Was it all worth the fleeting moments of passion that consumed us? That's the thing about choices. They define you, shape you, haunt you. And this choice? It's one I'll carry with me forever.